Welcome to Aspen Leading Edge. I'm Patty Roberts from St. Mary's University School of Law, and today's guest is one of my fellow deans, Dean Melanie Leslie. She is with Cardozo Law School and is entering her 12th year of service in that role, a long, long tenure in law school deaning. So welcome, Melanie.
Hi, nice to see you.
Oh, it's great to see you too. And I want to talk first, as I have been immersed lately in Dean tenure research,
Hmm.
about what made you decide to become a dean and what that path looked like. Because you have the privilege, the honor of being the first Cardozo Law graduate and the first woman to hold this position. So, what did that pathway look like for you?
I did not set out to do this. I think I'm very good at 5-year plans for institutions, not so good at that for myself. I've been more of a person who's just sort of see where life takes me, work real hard, and when a door opens, kind of jump through it and hope for the best. Um, so I know, in fact, I was fairly certain for me. I was on the Cardozo faculty for 20 years when I became dean.
Oh
So,
boy, so you knew
yeah,
them inside and out.
inside and out. I grew up with these people. I was also a graduate, as you mentioned. So I knew some of them as teachers, and I knew some of them as many of them as colleagues. And I knew a lot about my university. And so I did have a lot of institutional knowledge, but I never, from sitting where I was as faculty, the job of dean never looked that interesting to me. I wasn't quite sure what they spent all their time doing. I knew there was fundraising. I didn't know if I'd like that. And so I didn't really think about it. And I've been asked several times by a couple different deans if I would be the vice dean. That's the position at our school for associate dean for academic affairs, called the vice dean. And I had said no because I knew myself well enough to know that my scholarship would probably come to a screeching halt
Oh yes.
if I took an administrative job. And it's not true for everybody, but I guess I have to decide what speed I'm running on. And if I'm multitasking all the time, finding that quiet time for quiet reflection and deep thought is unlikely to happen. I'm likely to just keep generating new projects and working in that way. So I waited for 20 years because I really wanted to have a record as a scholar first, so that I knew that if it turned out I was kind of leaving that behind a little, that I at least accomplished something meaningful in that career. And so at some point around then, the vice dean announced he was stepping down, and I just went into the dean's office and said, if you want me to do it, I'll do it. And I said for 1 year only, and then I'll go back to the faculty.
Wow. Look where we are. How long were you the vice dean?
Well, technically about 6 months, because the dean at the time, 6 months in, announced that he was leaving to take another deanship. And I remember looking at him and saying, you can't, I'm not ready for this. That's what I said. I don't know what I'm doing. And so I didn't think I would be dean. And the faculty decided it was a tough time. It was the year in 2015 when law school applications were at a historic low, I think like a 40-year low. So schools were really struggling. Also, the kind of higher end of what you might call in terms of statistics of the pool had really shrunk. So schools were really deeply discounting tuition. It was kind of an arms race for students. It was causing a lot of financial upheaval. So it was a rough time to get into it. And so I wasn't sure it was anything that I was particularly interested in, but the faculty thought it would be better to have a kind of quick search instead of waiting a year, having a search firm and going for a year. They did the search in 3 months.
Holy cow, that's
And
super speed.
and one of the reasons they worked through the provost on this, and one of the reasons was because they thought there were a couple good internal candidates, and they didn't think, given what was going on, that there'd be a lot of really great external candidates who were ready for the challenge. So I think they just wanted stability and some competence from the get-go. So I didn't apply right away, and they started the search, and I started to see people who were putting their name in, and I thought, well, wait a minute. They're not talking about the real problem, or we've got some real issues here. We got to talk about how we're going to fix them. Where's the vision? So I started to think, so I still remember one day I sat on my bed on a Saturday, and I just sat there quietly and thought, do I have a vision? Like, if I were to switch into this role, what would I do? What do I think is the essence of the school, and how would I move it forward? And I wrote everything down, and I thought, well, I'll throw my hat in the ring. And if I don't get the job, it's fine because I already am a law professor and I'm so lucky. But that's the same way I made the decision to go to law school. I had been a singer and an actor in New York for 5 years,
Wait a
and
minute. This
you
is
knew
something
this.
I didn't know this. Oh my
Oh,
gosh, a singer and an
yeah,
actor.
I have some pictures.
Oh,
Um,
we gotta see those. Next time
so
we talk, I want to see those.
So I was doing that and I was getting this is in my 20s. I was just getting progressively more restless and dissatisfied and thinking and bored, frankly, intellectually. And I just walked into a Barnes and Noble and bought a book called How to Take the LSATs. And I started doing the practice exams and thought, oh my gosh, I love this. And
That's
it was the first time in
wow.
my life that I lost track of time because I was engaged in something. I loved taking the and partly
Well,
because it was waking up a part of me that I didn't know existed,
yeah.
right? It was like,
Mhm.
oh, I didn't know it. Because when you're an actor and you're very analytical, people always tell you it's a problem. You got to like, no,
Yeah.
you're too analytical. And I thought it was just a bad character trait that I had. So anyway, that's how and then I thought I'll just take the LSAT and see what happens. And then I thought, oh, that went well. I guess I'll just apply to law school and see what happens. So that's kind of how my whole career's unrolled. So anyway, I threw my hat in the ring and got the job, and I really, really loved it. As hard as it was, I still remember I was very worried about turning things around, and I made a deal with the university. I was going to cut the class. And I had to fight very hard. And naturally, not because the university wasn't supportive, but because it was a multi-million-dollar decision, right? That's a huge,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and I cut, I don't know, 50 people out of the class. And I just made that kind of my deal breaker in the negotiation. And it was really, really tough. And turning some things around was very challenging. And I was very stressed out. And one day I was just going on and on. I want to do this, but I don't know how to my husband. And he looked at me and he said, I've never seen you so happy. And that kind of
Oh,
summed it up
wow. Yeah.
because I loved the mix of things that you do as dean and the strategic thinking and the ability to implement and change something. That's important. So even on days when I think, am I crazy? What am I doing? I feel really lucky to have the job.
Well, that's terrific. And certainly Cardozo and the rest of us who are deans with you are very fortunate because of that pathway. But I just have to stop and say first, I don't think anybody has ever said they loved taking or preparing for the LSAT. So let's just acknowledge that. And then the other piece is, so were you acting and singing in things that I might know that our listeners might
Not really. I was in some
know?
Ponderosa Steakhouse commercials. I had
Oh,
some walk-ons on One Life to Live, I think. I was a singer for a band that toured, but it was terrible music, but a gig is a gig, as they say in the business. So I I really hated the music, and I'm not going to tell you what it was. It was terrible disco music, and it was fun for a while.
yeah. Well, okay,
But
we'll get
yeah.
back to the serious
Yeah,
discussion.
let's get back to business.
Yeah. So you sat on your bed and you wrote down what your vision for Cardozo Law School was, and you were soon selected as dean, and now you're starting your 12th year. What was in that vision that you've been very pleased about accomplishing,
Mhm.
and maybe how has that vision changed for the
Mm.
future?
Well, initially it was very pragmatic because there were some just massive issues because of the economy that had to be dealt with. And I had absolutely no business being the person. I had no training for this, right? As a lot of us who are law professors, you go into this job and you're managing a budget of somewhere between what, 20 and $60 million. You're managing a giant team. You're managing up to the provost. You're fundraising. You're dealing with facilities. It just admissions, careers. It goes on, and you've got basically, I think the strength that you have when you're an academic is you understand the business that you are in. You
Yeah.
understand how academics think. You understand the enterprise, the scholarly enterprise, the teaching enterprise. So that's critical. In every other sphere, I had zero experience. So I was proud, I guess, of finding out that I was a quick study and that I could learn all that. And I made mistakes. A lot of mistakes. You hire the wrong people, you make the wrong calls. It's going to happen. I had a very supportive board, and one of them was a CEO who had just, company he started had just gone public for like $1 billion. And he said to me, Melanie, most important thing is you got to make decisions. You can 20 to 30% are going to be wrong, but it's worse that he said when you don't make a decision, you're making a decision.
Oh, yes, it's the worst.
So
You can't
just
move forward if you don't make
yep.
decisions.
So you do your best. And that kind of gave me the confidence or the courage maybe to just keep going. And so I was proud of the fact that our job numbers were really, really weak when I started because of the economy in New York and because the class was too big for the market. And so fixing that, really learning about best practices and career success, finding through trial and error the right dean for that, the right dean of career services, finding the people who were excited to be helping people find jobs, who were good at it. That was a 5-year project, really building that. I had to make a lot of hard calls. I'm really proud of that because if we're not doing that, if we're not helping our students find the best first job for them, what are we doing?
Yeah, I
We
mean,
have a
that's why they come to us,
responsibility.
right? They don't come for the
Exactly.
intellectual rigor.
You're right. We have that, but you're right. That's not what they're not so sure about that when they come. And so I felt really, really, that was my first kind of major, and we went up a bunch of points in US News, although that's all I'm going to say because I don't think US News deserves any of our time because it's crazy. But it helped in terms of admissions. And so I think it was feeling like I also worked a lot on improving the student experience outside of the classroom. We were super good at the classroom. We had very, very good faculty. My feeling as a former student and a longtime faculty member was we could do better at really supporting people outside of the classroom, especially people who might feel they didn't fit in or it was overwhelming for them or were so worried about the financial commitment that they couldn't concentrate or people who didn't take to it, right? We owe them. Law school, especially at a private school, is extraordinarily expensive. I felt we owed them more, and so I kind of built the academic success structure, which we did not have. So I guess those would be the first, in the first 5 years, the two things I would point to as the thing that I'm proudest of. And then once we kind of righted the ship, I had a second strategic plan that was just, I never do those big strategic plans with something for everyone with 4,000 pages that you post on your website. I feel like the most important thing about a strategic plan is that if it's well crafted, it tells you what to say no to.
Hmm.
Because when you
Yeah.
start, everybody has an idea about what you should be doing. And every alum comes up to you at a cocktail party and has a great idea. And if faculty members have competing ideas. And it's not that the ideas most of the time are poor. They can be great and outside of the box. But you can't do everything and you will kill your staff if you try. And it's not possible. So for me, my strategic plans almost look like bullet points. And I want to know at any given time, what are my 3 to 5 key strategic priorities? And if a new idea can't be done without sucking time away, too much time away from the strategic priorities, I have to say that's a great idea and we'll file it. And as things change, we'll revisit it. But right now, I need to focus on, X or Y. And so I always kind of have those 3 to 5 strategic priorities in my mind that help me in making decisions. And also when I'm talking to donors and they want to give you some money for I don't know, poodles in the law clinic and you need it for scholarships for financial aid for students, right? If you have that in your mind, you can steer them so that your interests be more in alignment. I'm forgetting what your question was. Am I
No, no,
answering
no,
it?
that's perfect. And actually, when you started talking about kind of your path to the deanship and being vice dean at a very intentional moment, I really respect the fact that you wanted that 20 years in scholarship and to accomplish what you wanted in your field. But you also said something that we found in the AALS Dean Tenure Survey and research that Associate Dean for Academic Affairs didn't prepare you as
No.
a faculty member for the position. And of course, that's right. And there's so many things you have to learn, and there's 15 different things that come at you in a day. And so I think acknowledging that for our colleagues who are thinking about becoming deans
Mm,
is really important. And I think that you have played a huge role in helping to change that for aspiring deans and deans. And if you could share the annual conference, a little bit
Mm.
about the annual conference you all put on.
Yeah, so it's called the Dean's Leadership Academy. It is fully remote. We started it during COVID, actually. And the idea was not to compete with or replace any of the other excellent programs that are out there. Both the ABA and the AALS do a great job of convening the deans and giving us really helpful advice and panels, as does the Villanova Seattle Dean's
Yes,
Pipeline
yes.
program, also excellent. Our idea was to supplement what they were doing by doing something a little bit different, which was to have consultants who are not law school deans, who maybe people can't afford to pay, give us sort of what I wish I knew in the first 90 days of being a dean. So it's very fundamental. Topics have ranged from how to give a speech at the drop of a hat to how to understand a law school budget to managing a team. So most of the speakers are not deans, and it's been really, really fun to do that. And we do originally the idea was it was for brand new deans, get between 100 to 200 signups a year, and I'd say two-thirds, three-quarters of those are not new deans. They're people who are in various leadership positions who are thinking about becoming deans, and that's great. That's been great too.
Yeah, that's building that leadership pipeline is so important. And I have really appreciated when I participated in the academy, which I've done a couple of times now, because there are voices from outside the legal academy. There are
Mhm.
things, certainly there are things we can learn from other professions, other businesses, other professionals that can inform what we do in the law school sector. So I appreciate it
Mhm.
and the different voices. So you mentioned that you started this during COVID. Of course, we both served during COVID
And still
when
standing, still here to talk
still
about it.
standing. That's right. And I think on the one hand, we kind of say, oh, that's, the past. We don't think about it. But when I was doing the research with the deans, COVID came up a lot more than I thought it
Mm,
would, given that we're a few years
mhm.
out now. Tell me a little bit about what the lessons were that you learned from COVID.
Happy to, but I should mention just the day COVID broke because Cardozo, I don't know if you were aware, it broke in New York City, I think in the United States. Maybe there were a couple cases on the West Coast too. And there was a patient zero who had been walking around Manhattan and New Rochelle where he lived. This is very public information. I'm not giving anything. He's done interviews. And he had COVID for 2.5 months and didn't know what was wrong with him and he was our alum,
Oh my
and he
goodness.
had an office in New York, a law office in New York, where we had two students interning, and his son was in the dorm at our undergraduate institution. And so I walked into the office one day, and my director of communications was standing there, and he said, "You got to come into my office. You got to come into my office." And I came into his office, and there was the mayor's office on the one screen, and our university on another screen. And we had the first case of COVID with our two students who were exposed and the student who was exposed and was in the dorm. And so we were kind of on the front, the first people who had to deal with all this stuff. And my gosh, it just
Oh
took
my
off and it
goodness. You
didn't
were like
stop. And
location zero.
yeah, because New York's so densely populated, it made managing COVID so much harder. And in the beginning, they had those 6 feet apart. Do you remember the 6 feet apart restrictions? Did you have
Oh,
them?
I sure do. Yeah, we had them.
Yeah, and we could not operate a law school and be 6 feet apart. There was absolutely no way. We have a high-rise building with no outdoor space. It was impossible. And so we were closed for 16 months. And
16?
16 months.
Oh my, wow.
Yeah. And so we did it, and I'm so proud of the students who graduated during that time. But boy, talk about trial by fire. What did I learn? I think the first thing you learn is you're only as good as your team. That's a cliche. It's a cliche for a reason. When you have people in your team who are not bringing it, you got to see if you can manage them to be stronger, and then we were so dependent on one another to be proactive and team players and all of that. So that's the first thing. The second thing was we had no plan. Now, you can't really plan for crisis because everyone's different and all of that. But things like I had no principle or policy about when I would speak out about matters and when I wouldn't. And everybody wanted me to speak, as I'm sure you remember that happened to you.
Oh, yes.
Everybody wanted a statement about something all the time. And then there was awful, we're in the middle of COVID in, I think, June or July of 2020, and George Floyd was murdered on camera. And so then you take that reckoning, right, on top of it. And it was a kind of constant demand. We had to examine policies and what are we doing and how complicit are we in this? Well, how can we do better? How can we do better as a country and as a law school on issues of race? It was really, really challenging. But to get back to my main point, every time, I mean, it was constant, this conversation about should I say something? What should I say? When should I say it? And that was really hard. And I've done a lot of thinking and policy writing since then, but I think that was maybe the hardest thing because you really had to be there for people and you couldn't be there in person. And so everything you said covered and it was just carried enormous weight and had to be right. And it was also a time when everybody was angry. So one thing we decided we just had to accept in the summer of 2020, especially around COVID, was there is no right solution to COVID. There is only the best we can do. And we knew that every decision we made would fully anger 50% of our stakeholders. And
Pretty
we just
accurate.
had we just had to take it. There was no getting around it. It was crazy.
It was crazy. In June 2020 is when I started. So I moved across the country during COVID and then started. And within a minute of arriving is when George Floyd was killed. And so it was insane.
Yeah.
But we made it through. We're stronger. Our communities are stronger for having gone through those trials and tribulations. And
But
you have,
there's one other thing I'll say, if we have the
yeah,
time, that I did learn. And this is, I worry a little bit about the move to online education for JD students. And I think certainly there's a way in which it might really help with legal deserts and affordability. So I'm not saying I'm against it or opposed to it, but I am saying that it made me much more focused on the non-classroom training and learning that goes on in a law school. The importance of connecting, the importance of creating networks for these students, the learning they do in these student groups, in those leadership positions, the way they form community and bonds that will basically they'll feed each other through their whole careers. That was like just stripped of them, for a year. I hope that online programs don't undervalue that piece, like figure out a way to replicate that piece, because I think it is part of what makes a good lawyer is really learning that you are in service to others and you have to be a communitarian, you have to be a team player and a collaborator.
yeah, I can't agree more. You have to be very intentional about that off-camera experience for those students and how to assimilate them into your community and your culture, which we've spent a lot of time focused on at St. Mary's. But my son was in law school at the time, and he spent half of his time not in the building, not meeting the
Hmm.
people, talking, dropping into a professor, that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
it had to have been a lesser experience for those students, unfortunately, and bravo to them
Mm.
who managed to finish regardless.
Yeah.
You mentioned fundraising. I understand you have a big project on the horizon.
Ah, yes. Cardozo's 50th birthday is next month.
Happy
And
birthday. That's
thank
great.
you. We're very excited. We're having a big gala in October. But 5 years ago, we started a fundraising campaign geared toward the end. It was a $50 million goal. We're at about, I'm not positive, but I think we're at 65, 68 million right now. So
Congratulations. That's tremendous.
thank you. Thank you. It's very exciting and all for core objectives. And one of the gifts is from the Kwanzaa Jones and Jose E. Feliciano. They have given us a $6 million gift to renovate our clinical education programs facility.
That's
And
extraordinary.
yeah, so our clinical education program is something I'm quite proud of and have supported and expanded as dean. It's expensive clinical education, right? It's very low student faculty ratio, but it's just so worth it, both in terms of the unparalleled education students get when they're taught by a full-time faculty member And in terms of the good that these clinics do in the world, we have 10, or it changed, I think it's 10 full-time in-house clinics. And we hadn't been able to do much about the clinical space since the school really opened, and so this is an opportunity to do this complete reimagining of what a clinical, which is essentially a law firm, right? What a public interest law firm should look like. And we're having so much fun doing that. And I think we're breaking ground in 2027 for sure. It's unclear what month yet. You know how that is, but
Yes, yeah.
hopefully spring of 2027.
Oh, that's outstanding. Well, how great that your donors recognize the importance of that. I'm a clinician by trade, and so I
Mm,
know the impact that the clinics have on the community and the law students. So that's really terrific.
yeah, we're excited about that.
Well, before we conclude, I'm going to ask you the question that I end all of my podcast interviews with, and that is, what are your predictions for the future of legal education in the coming decade?
Hmm.
Easy question.
Hmm. AI is very much on everyone's mind, of course, right? So we are all, I know, with our subcommittees and our faculty working groups, trying to figure out how to most effectively train students to use AI in a way that is ethical and does not stunt their growth or inhibit creativity or the ability to do what lawyers need to do, which is to think deeply and carefully about something. That's a challenge because AI gets better every week. And some of the stuff you ask it to do, I mean, it's kind of shocking how well it can do it. But you take people like us who've been out of law school for decades, we can kind of really evaluate. Oh, this piece is great and this piece missed the boat, and oop, they said this one thing here that I don't think is right, or this argument doesn't make any sense even though it sure sounds good, right? We can do all that.
Yes.
And if we bypass that in our training of students, they're not going to be able to. That is a huge challenge because they, of course, law school's stressful. And you got this tool sitting right there that promises to make everything easy or easier. So I think that's going to be the big project for all law schools is to effectively handle this. It's not should we use it. I mean, that ship has sailed. I remember when the internet, all right, just to date myself, I remember when the internet came out when it was invented. And there was a big faculty discussion about whether we should allow Wi-Fi in our building. And the majority of the people said, absolutely not. Students will be distracted. And one younger faculty member went, you guys don't get it. It's here. It's not going away. It's going to be everywhere. We have to teach students how to deal with that instead of trying to keep it at bay. And I never forget that because it's the same thing here. I think being mad about AI and saying whatever fair criticisms we want to make of it, it's beside the point. We just have to figure out what we have to lead on it instead of react, right? And I don't mean lead in the development of it. I mean lead in terms of the messaging, like how do we teach and how do we train in a way that keeps them growing as individuals and not stunts their growth and their development. And we're teachers, right? So this ought to be something we can do, but I don't think it's easy. And I think there are going to be a lot of fits and starts and going down wrong directions. And but we'll look back on this. This is bigger than the invention of the internet. It's going
Yeah.
to be the biggest thing that any of us have ever seen.
Well, and it is hard because it is so attractive, right? You can see where students would put in all their notes and say, create an outline for me,
Yeah,
AI, and they would get one. They would get a
yeah.
great outline. But I
As
had
though that will help them at all.
Yeah, exactly. I had Professor Barry Friedman from NYU and Dean John Goldberg from Harvard Law School on the podcast last week. And they wrote a book about, how to succeed in exams. And they were saying, they could do that, but it's the doing. It's the
Yeah.
actual doing that is the important thing. Just like when
Mhm.
you practice for the LSAT or when the students do the outline themselves, that's where the learning happens.
Yeah.
They
Well,
weren't,
and I've always said that to my students, even when they're racing around the building trying to get other people's outlines, quote unquote, right? Like the more outlines they get, the better prepared they're going to be. And it's like, don't ever read anyone else's outline. That's worthless, right? It's the making of the outline. That's where the studying happens. I think you're right. I'm sure, I have reason to believe that our students are already doing this.
Yes.
I don't mean Cardozo students in particular. I just mean
Oh, no,
students
all law
generally
students.
across
Yeah.
are already, there are products. I'm getting a demo of one next week where they're purporting to do this for students, and it worries me.
Yes, I think we're all worried. And I think there's room to be both optimistic and worried, right? Both
Right,
things can be
right.
true. I
It
think
could
that's
be
where we are.
very good. I mean, it could be a very good development for people who are underrepresented, who have no access to lawyers. Like there are ways in which, especially for more simple issues, day-to-day things, it could be extraordinarily beneficial and helpful if the appropriate regulation and safeguards are put in place. It's just going to be the brave new world for us, right?
It's going to be tricky for a few
It's going to be
years till we
tricky
adjust to
for a few
it.
years, just a few, just
Just a
two,
few, maybe
just 2
10.
years, and then we will know. We will have figured it out.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dean Leslie, for talking to me about your experience at Cardozo Law School and what's going on there. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, I hope you'll check out additional episodes of the Aspen Leading Edge podcast, where we talk to legal education thought leaders from across the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much.